Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So we are from 8th group. Will be presented our material about silent way method. Specification of content. The first one is definition of silent way. The second one is advantages and disadvantages. And the last one is general characteristics. The definitions of the silent way. Silent way or silent teacher is the name of a language teaching method invented by Caleb Categno in 1917, a language teaching expert who applies the principles of cognitivism and philosophy in his teaching. The silent way is a methodology of a teaching language based on the idea that teachers should be as silent as possible during a class, but learners should be encouraged to speak as much as possible. For the next present material by our members.
Advantages and disadvantages of silent way. Advantages: number 1, the use of the silent way enables a very high degree of interaction as well between the teacher and the student. Number 2, the self-esteem of the student will be increased and this will enhance learning. And number 3, it embodies a new approach to education in general. And disadvantages: number 1, the silent way is a very abstract way of learning a language. Number 2, this method can be benefited by the teacher only in small groups of students. And number 3, for some learners, one limitation in the approach to language basic which begin with seemingly irrelevant discussion about roots and which involves silence and concentration and games with the teacher about meaning.
Okay, general characteristic. According to Stevik, 1980, the first is teaching must be a subordinate element of learning. The second is learning is not just an imitation or training process. The third is the teacher tries not to interfere with teaching activities. And the last is when working, learners should try to relate the various experiences gained during first language learning. Okay, the second is according to Carambelas, 1971. The first is repetitions and imitations should be avoided. The second is students are only given the opportunity to listen once. The third is learning materials are never shown in the aspect of memorization. And the first is teachers rarely make corrections because students are considered capable of correcting themselves. Okay, the fifth is speaking activities are carried out up to doing writing exercise. And the last is if necessary, learning are responsible for their learning process.
Next point is roles of teachers and students. First is teacher roles. The silent way is not a teacher-centered approach, while the teacher uses mainly gestures and facial expressions to address the learners. His or her main task is the teaching of the language by letting the students test out grammatical form and so on, and getting out of their way so that they can discover these things on their own. Second is learner roles. The learners are expected to participate in class actively. They should be willing to make mistakes to test out the basic language elements via the usage of the materials provided and generally be highly motivated. As a learner, it is important not to get frustrated in case the silent way lesson sometimes may be a little tricky and the meaning of the materials is not always clear at first sight. Therefore, it is important to be able and willing to think in a rather abstract way so that the meaning of the provided material can be detected.
Teaching procedures. Teaching procedures divided into 9, namely, the first is the teacher opens the class by greeting and greeting the students. The next is the teacher evaluates what will be learned today. The next is the teacher writes examples of greeting sentences, their meanings, and their responses on the blackboard. The next is the teacher shows the correct way of reading, or one time, while the students listen and listen. The next is the teacher asks students to practice the correct pronunciation based on what students heard. And the next is the teacher makes 4 groups. The next is teacher will ask the students to practice the dialogue brought by the teacher. And the next is the teacher closes the class by concluding the lesson. And the last is the teacher gives assignment and close the class. Teaching techniques from the beginning levels. Students do 90% or more of the talking. Being silent moves the focus of the classroom from the teacher to the students and can encourage cooperation among them. It also frees the teacher to observe the class. A silent way classroom also makes extensive use of peer correction. Students are encouraged to help their classmates when they have trouble with any particular feature of the language. This help should be made in a cooperative fashion, not a competitive one. One of the teacher's tasks is to monitor these interactions so that they are helpful and do not interfere with students' learning.